Hey, Mike, it's all about travel here in the Sky Lounge. And, you got any good airplane stories to tell us?
So my favorite story is right out of school. In fact, I dropped out of graduate school at Northeastern in Boston to take a job to run a privatization program for USAID and Brown University. And they hired me because they needed a Russian speaking MBA. And they needed a Russian speaker who was not a native Russian speaker because a native Russian speaker back then would never be accepted. They'd be considered carpetbaggers. They had to have somebody that spoke with a heavy accent that made lots of mistakes, but still knew something about business. I hardly knew anything, but they hired me, and I flew over. I stopped off in Germany for a week, um, and then went to get my flight in Frankfurt, and I missed it because I got lost in the German subway system. I speak many languages. German is not one of them. And even though I was actually still 10 minutes early, that they still like Germans, they left early. So I was pretty ticked. And I freaked out a little bit because somebody that I didn't, there were no cell phones. This is 1993. There was no way to contact somebody in Belarus in real time. My plane was just going to get there, and they had no idea where I was. Um, the next plane to Minsk was in 2 days. So Lufthansa shoved me on a flight to Moscow, I think mainly to get rid of me. In fact, I'm sure that's what it was, to get rid of me. So they stuck me on a plane to Moscow. I made it to Moscow. I did not have an entry visa for Russia, only Belarus. So I get to the visa station, and I, I was desperate. I played dirty. I was tired. I was scared. I was frustrated. And I basically blamed it all on the Germans because I knew the one thing that back then would always play with the Russians was blame it on the Germans, right?
Yeah, yeah,
The Germans screwed me just like Hitler did back in 1941, right?
yeah.
And that was enough that they gave me a visa, and somehow they gave me credit for my my incomplete flight so that I could then take an internal flight from Moscow to Minsk. So I
Okay.
transferred over to the domestic airport, and I waited 12 hours for that flight, wondering kind of what was going to happen next. I finally got on that flight on what must have been a million-year-old aircraft. It was a Tupolev 134, a knockoff of our L-1011.
Mhm.
And back then, on sort of ex-Soviet planes, it was like a bus. There were no assigned seats. You got a ticket and you found a seat, and that's where it was. So as the American, they put me on the plane last, and my seat was next to a passed out Russian soldier. He was just completely out, but he was taking half of my seat. Take off. It's 10 at night. Again, there's nobody meeting me at the airport. I'm making this up as I go along as a 23-year-old speaking broken Russian. On the plane, the guy across from me asked me what time it is, and I didn't realize at the time. I showed him my watch. I couldn't hear that. There's no soundproofing. There was just 80 decibels of jet engine going on behind me. But he saw my watch, and he confirmed his suspicions that I was American. Started having a conversation, and they told me they were smugglers. They smuggled basically bootleg CDs and got boom boxes basically across the border without the tariffs. And we come in for a landing. They say, what are you doing? I said, well, I guess I'm just going to get a hotel. They say, you can't just get a hotel, right? There's a whole process. You can't just walk into a hotel here and get a reservation. There's a whole process by which you have to do that. So you should come home with us. And I thought, well, it's either that or stay in the airport. So I went home with these guys who literally told me they were criminals. They told me they were criminals. And I go home with them, and we feast on sauerkraut and pickled garlic and vodka. And back then I was a total lightweight. So after 2-3 shots, I was gone. I passed out. I woke up and they're as good as my word. They found the business card of the guy who was supposed to meet me at the airport in my wallet. They called him and he came and got me. And those guys became very good friends of mine. I still keep in touch with them to this day.
Oh, that's so awesome. Wow.
And if I were in my age now, I never would have done that. That's only because I was 23 and naive and stupid that I ever would have done anything like that.
Wow. That is so cool.